Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the North Reading School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. As Dr. Daly mentioned, it's also being streamed this time, we believe, on NORCAM, and it's also being broadcast on the educational channel. The no members in attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceeding as provided for in this order. So if anybody is listening to the public and you do have questions, I will try to remember to leave it open after different topics, but please feel free to jump in if you have questions or comments. So with that done, we'll move on to the first order of business, which is public input. If there are any members of the public that want to speak about something that is not on the agenda tonight, I'll pause for 5 or 6 seconds to let you jump in. And if you're on mute, I think it's *6 to unmute. Okay, hearing none, I will move to Julia. Julia Thorstad is kind enough to join us to give us a student report. Julia, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Students have completed their first week of Phase 1 of remote learning. The week went very well, with teachers being able to set up video chats for the designated class periods and classes with all or close to all attendance, with an emphasis on no homework, assessments, or grading at this time, but rather a continuation of learning and a deeper exploration of standards. Both teachers and students think that it will run even smoother this week, as both sides are able to work out the kinks we encountered. Many teachers chose to use the allotted hour by meeting on video chat for about 10 to 15 minutes to check in with everyone, explain the assignment for that day, and then let us go to complete it for the bulk of the class and open the video chat at the end for any questions. Students understand that advanced placement classes require additional work on your own to study for the now online exams. Students are overall very happy with this setup for remote learning, especially having the structure of school back in our daily routine and the face-to-face social interaction from seeing our classmates and teachers. Starting class at 10 has helped students to get close to their recommended hours of sleep as well, and a comfortable hour for lunch is always nice. Social aspects of high school life have changed, but students still manage to connect with their friends using technology. A lot of kids organize their own video chats with friends or people they have not seen in a while. My lunch table has met on video call during the break between classes to eat and talk with each other. Student Council also made a challenge using the TikTok app for who could get the most likes on a video, which was really fun and brought a lot of students back together with a laugh. My favorite student work so far was from Anatomy with Miss Jolie Bear. Before we left for school, we were on our immune system unit, so to continue with this learning, she found us a virtual immunology lab from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute that simulates an interactive lab environment and lets you click on various medical equipment and walk you through the procedures, which was very realistic and a cool way to learn from home. The lab allowed us to do the antibody testing that could be used in the near future to determine who of the population has already been exposed to COVID and can return to the public, as what we learned about the immune system is that once your body encounters a disease, it builds up antibodies that will fight the disease the second time you're exposed to it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other? So questions, comments from anybody? I'll just sort of open it up. Can you describe the winning TikTok video?
Yeah, it was actually a student who she contacted like some of our favorite teachers, and she had them send in videos of them doing a dance. So it was like a combination of teachers and students. That was fun, and it's still up on the TikTok under NR Stuco if anybody wants to check it out.
Perfect, thank you. Now, so Julie, you graduate this year, so I guess my question would be, number one, you know where you're going to college, and number two, well, first why don't we start with that?
Well, I'm actually a junior, but...
Oh, you're a junior, I said
yeah.
Okay. Are you planning on doing, so it's junior year, I imagine this is when you're starting to look at colleges. Are you being here? Are you going to try to do things in summer tours, or?
Julia, this is Dr. Daly. I promoted you to class of 2020 in our agenda here, so that's why. I'm glad that we have you for another year. I got a typo in there, but I do want to say, did you mentioned that there's some of the benefits? It's funny. I was thinking about, I've put a lot of time in as Mr. McGowan as well on the school start times, and I did think about that. I mean, it was nice to see that the way the high school schedule worked out. It is kind of conducive to that research as well. But how do you feel, now going into, we're just into the second week now of this remote learning. Are you starting to feel um, a little bit better than maybe in those first few weeks where there's sort of, the new normal? Like, can you just talk about how you feel about this?
Yeah, I definitely like having the online classes now. Like, my schedule feels a lot more normal than it was when we had like optional learning being sent out through emails. Like, that was really chaotic when there was like we weren't sure what we were supposed to do. But even if teachers are just gonna like I said, like come on to the video chat and we can see their face, and then they'll just like send out an assignment, and we'll have like that hour period to like work on it and be like, okay, like I'm at school right now. It just feels a lot more like structured.
Great, thank you.
So for Julie, I don't know if you're getting this at all, but my brother's a teacher. He said to me, it was funny. He's like, in some ways, I think doing this digital learning is preparing students more than we ever thought, because more and more in the real world, it is about this. It's about being able to present on Zoom meetings. It's about knowing, when to speak when there's 20 people on there, and how to speak and all that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you're finding that at all, but like in many ways, this is as good as prep as you're going to get for real world business, because more and more, this is how I do most of my meetings even before the pandemic. I don't know if you're thinking that at all, anything different.
No, I completely agree. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you taking the time. You are more than welcome to stay and listen in if you want, or you can absolutely sign off and enjoy your night. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia.
Okay, so moving on. There's no continued business, so we'll go to the new business. As is the new norm, I guess we'll begin with an update on COVID-19. Dr. Daly, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I think some of the things that we just discussed are sort of at the foreground of our conversation tonight. We're in the second week of our remote learning plan. I think it's going well from all reports, although as I've mentioned in some of my updates to the community that, I'm also hearing from members of our committee have checked in with me, which is great, and also parents. My concern is that right now we're in what's called phase one, which is this structure where we are learning the system and we're doing remote learning, but we're going deeper with standards that already exist. And some of the gaps that exist right now among students that may not have device access or internet access at home or power at their home. Not everything we're doing is online, but a lot of it does require a device, and it's certainly helpful to have more than one if you've got siblings. Other factors, students with learning disabilities, and the supports, we're giving as many supports as possible, but there's definitely challenges there. Another thought is, even just some parents who might, have a challenge for any number of reasons, including that they're trying to work from home, that they're trying to manage 3 kids, that they're trying to, they're not trained as teachers, trying to work with their students. There's lots of different challenges that are home. And when we talk about the digital divide, even economically, one thing that we never really factored in is that even those that can afford additional devices and supports, right now you can't get these items from the stores. So that's something that we never really planned on when you talk about needing to do a rollout of devices. But we've been able to get out over 250 devices to families in need. We've been handing out devices at the school. Dr. Downs, Nan Cook, and myself, and all the principals have been helping kind of to organize to get people to fill out the form. And I've been delivering some and handing some out to people, and it's really, in some ways, it's been a pretty neat way to meet people. Not that this week it's been interesting because it's, with folks coming up with masks and gloves, and we've been following all kinds of safety precautions. So you might not get to put a name to a face just yet, but it's been, I think people have really appreciated those devices and being able to have those from the school. So just the question that keeps coming up, a lot of the parents will ask too, where are these devices coming from? So what we've done is we've taken carts that are in the schools and we've pulled them apart. And we've dismantled those carts because they were being used in classrooms. Obviously, without the classrooms in use, we want those devices in the students' hands that need them. So we've literally unwired carts, taken them and passed out those Chromebooks to people in need. And they're all signing, forms and understandings that these will be, safely cared for and returned at the end of the period of closure. But it's gone very well, and I appreciate everyone for their help with that. So as we move into this possible phase 2 of learning, I'd love to hear more from all of you about your thoughts about this. But we're certainly getting a lot of questions from teachers, from parents, and someone. I was on a call this morning with our association leader, and he said when you talk about going into remote learning, it's similar to when you get a conversation going about homework. It's about 50%. 50% of the people think there's not enough homework being assigned and kids should be asked to do more, and the other 50% say it's too much, the kids need a break. And it's very similar, I think, with the remote learning. I think we're getting that sense that some feel like it's going about as well as it could, and people are feeling a lot of the pressure and that they're overwhelmed. And I think there's another group that says, come on, we're ready for more, we want to move on, we want to keep going. So as the schools and the principals, especially I think at the secondary level, and I'm willing to entertain, and if there's thought about even doing this differently, but I'm willing to entertain differences in moving into different phases of this at secondary, high school versus middle versus elementary. But there is a lot of discussion about this week continuing phase 1, but maybe thinking about next week or the week after moving into phase 2. We still wouldn't have I would not recommend having homework because I think there's more than enough. I think everyone's realizing, if I can try to sum up what people are feeling, this distance learning as a full method of trying to communicate is exhausting. And so doing a half day of school certainly feels like about 3 times as long as far as exhaustion goes when you have these back-to-back-to-back assignments and responsibilities online. So the work would still be maintained within the periods just as it is now, but we may just begin to explore some new content. And as I said to the teachers before, we're going deeper with standards that we've already taught, but we're not turning the page in the curriculum. We're not moving on to new standards. We're not getting into new concepts. The suggestion would be for phase 2 to start to move into those new ideas. And so that's a discussion I want to have with the administrative council this week, but I certainly want your input as well. And the last thing I just want to update on at this moment, I think there's some other great things. The lunch program is continuing. We're handing out lunches. Anna McGovern and her crew are doing this every day. It's really fantastic what they're doing. And I just want to mention that the middle school DC trip is going to be canceled, and the company is canceling that as well. And Mr. Maloney, Ms. O'Connell, Dr. O'Connell have prepared some letters and information to go home to parents. So I wanted to share that with everyone tonight. And I'm certainly open for any other updates or questions. Michael, I don't know if you had anything to add before we open it up to questions?
Thank you, Dr. Daly. No, I think that was great. We continue, the business office operation continues to do a really good job working hard to manage the situation remotely, and payroll and payments continue to happen, bill warrants and payroll warrants. I appreciate the committee being so efficient with signing those with the DocuSign program. So
So I would want to, at least at the entire level, like high school altogether, I would want them to all agree to that it's the right time to move forward. My concerns would be once you start moving forward, any gaps that exist right now, whether it be, like I said before, technology, socioeconomic, or um, learning supports that are needed. When you introduce new concepts and new content, everything those gaps widen, and so that's just a concern. We need to be able to make sure that we're scaling up and the supports are working. So week one was really just getting a feel for it and getting a handle for it. I sent out a couple of updates on this to my teachers, and a lot of my special education teachers wrote back and said thank you for recognizing this, because I've been talking to parents who are very frustrated, and they're trying so hard to work with their students, and it's just there's just so many additional challenges in some homes, and we just want to be very cognizant that if we do move on, that we're not leaving folks behind. And so I trust my principals that they're going to get a great feel for this from their teachers, from their parents, from their students, about whether they're ready to try something new, and what that looks like. And I think everything we do, we just move ahead slowly. I think one of the big messages too is that we're not trying to replicate school, and we're not necessarily going to get to that same exact place that we get to every single year. And if we're trying to do that, it's going to be a disservice to the students. We need to continue some learning. We need to challenge them, have some new ideas and some new explorations. But we have that flexibility needs to be key. And I think the main questions that we received in week one were all about flexibility. Whenever someone thought it sounded too rigid, we needed to come back in and say, no, we can make that work for you and your schedule. I mean, just an example, if you've got two parents that are on the front lines as essential employees, and they say, you know what, when I get home at 6 o'clock, I want to work with my students then, and not during the day, then I think that's fine. That needs to be something that works for that family, and I think we need to be flexible in that way. So I think that's really it, Chris. We just want to make sure that when we do move ahead, that we've got everything in place with our student support system, to make sure that everyone's supported, and to move on. And it really was the recommendation from the state was to do this deeper learning piece, and a lot of districts have agreed that that's as far as they would go. But there's other districts, and we're among them, that have said from the get-go that if this goes on longer than a few weeks, we want to make sure that we continue to do what's best for our students in our community, and make sure that we can work together.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
A fair answer. Thank you, Chris. Rich, any comments or questions?
Yeah, thanks. Dr. Daly, do you have any sense of, you sound like you guys have done a great job of getting devices into people's hands and whatnot. Are you aware of students, especially at the high school, middle school level, but really any students who may have, who aren't really reachable, or still struggling in ways that they might not be under normal circumstances to access this learning? Is there a significant number, or are you aware of a number, or what's your sense of all that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question, Rich. I think my sense is that we've done a very good job of reaching a lot of people. From the number of surveys that I received back, I think we've hit just about everybody has filled out that survey. We did a two-pronged approach, so the teachers and principals also reached out to families, and the teachers and principals are also aware of folks that there may be a language barrier, there may be a device connectivity issue, where they're not able to complete the survey to get the information in, and so teachers and principals have assisted in helping families to complete those surveys to get the information in. I know that we've worked with some families that weren't able to complete the survey for any number of reasons, and we've been able to do that with them, fill it in over the phone. In some cases, they haven't been able to pick devices up, so we've hand delivered to their homes. And I do think, I think we've got some great teachers that are very, tuned in to the needs of their students. And I'm very confident that we have hit just about everybody that needs that. We had we had a good number the first couple of weeks. I think once we announced our remote learning plan, we had a huge surge. So last week, we doubled the amount that we had out there over a couple of days, and it was all different students that were applying, and some students, some of the parents said, that they feel like they can afford a device, but they couldn't get to a store to get one. Is it okay if they borrow one? Lots of parents said that they want to make sure that these are going to those families in need, and they don't want to take them away. But we were able to support all those families as well, because I think many of us have been in this situation now. We have maybe the parents have a computer and the kids have a computer, but you got three kids, and mom and dad are both trying to teach or work from home, and all three kids are on the computer. So having a few extra devices now to share. I think people also realized too, when they started to do some of the remote learning, that the specifications of their device may not have been the latest version or up to speed, and they weren't able to keep up with the assignments. So getting a device from the school is pretty good. Out of the survey, we had over 99% that were able to have connectivity at home, and those that said they didn't have it, we've reached out to them and included follow-ups at the school level to remind folks that there are free options from many of the internet providers, and that there are many ways to get connectivity at this point, and so we've been working to close many of those gaps in our district as well. So I feel pretty confident that we've hit just about everybody. I think if we didn't, we'd be hearing directly from teachers about students who are not completing the assignments. And just to be clear too, because I followed up with a few parents about this as well, these assignments, although it's flexible, we consider the remote learning plan to not be optional. This is not something you can opt in or opt out of. This is the curriculum, and it's the same. It's required that the students attend school, and so this is what school is right now. I think within that, there's a lot of room for flexibility, and the teachers are aware of that, and the principals are aware of that. But in the few cases where someone said, I just want to do my own plan, I've spoken to those folks and talked about, if you want to fully do that, that would be more of a homeschooling option. But I've kind of counted it, and the folks have agreed to say, let's just work within the current framework and make sure that that it's flexible, because I can ensure that the plan, I've seen those plans, I know the teachers are carrying out those plans, and I know that those are appropriate grade level expectations for the students. So that's really the way that works. But as I mentioned, and I'll say it over and over, within those plans, there needs room for flexibility. I'm feeling it with my own children at home, and our schools have been great. I think North Reading's been great as well. So. I'm sorry. Could you just repeat that question?
Sure. So you were talking earlier about your thoughts on moving on to new topics or new subjects within a class, whereas right now you're just sticking with where they were at the time of the closure. So my question is, would that and you indicated that there's some discussion about moving on to new topics. And I'm wondering if the school closures were extended through the end of June, which is certainly a possibility. Would that intensify that sort of discussion of where do we need to end up at the end of June?
I think it would, Rich. I think that's part of what we're thinking about. Is if this goes longer than May 4th, we want to get as many students as possible to the best place as possible. And so I think that's our goal. Not trying to get exactly to where you would if you were in school for the full amount of time and delivering everything face to face. But I think we have a better chance of getting more students where they need to be. If we were able to have some ability to move forward. And I think, again, to do it slowly, not to necessarily slam our foot on the gas here and change it all up. I think everyone knows that we can just start to slowly introduce some new ideas. But again, there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen here, and I think certainly that's how we're approaching it. I think some districts may be taking this and really just just going deeper and deeper and deeper with existing standards. I think that we're going to continue to do that, but I think we will. I'm sensing that the teachers and administrators feel that we can introduce some new concepts and some new ideas, and and do this well for our students.
And my last quick question is for Ms. Connolly, just regarding the lunches or the meals. I can't remember if we talked about it last week at the workshop or our previous regular meeting, but since then, has there been an increase in the number of meals given out, or has it been pretty steady? So we did re-advertise, and there has been a slight increase of about 10 to 15 additional meals per day, both breakfast and lunch. So we've gone from about 35 to about 45 on average each day right now. So there has been an increase. The DESC, I'm happy to also announce, has officially approved the waiver allowing all districts to claim those meals, and they're going to reimburse districts at the paid reimbursement rate, regardless of someone's eligibility or status. So that, from a financial perspective, that certainly helps. So there'll be some additional, federal reimbursement revenue by North Reading being a site. So we are officially going through that process to officially apply and get approved for that. So we are close to completing that process with the DESE, so we can claim the March mails and then continue to do that for April. So that's certainly a good thing at the state level that's happening. But we'll continue to make families aware with some reminders that that's available, and we'll continue to serve the needs of the program. Great, thanks.
Janine, any questions or comments?
Hi. I had a couple of questions. I think Julie had mentioned something about the AP exams. Are they learning it on their own? Are they given sites? And are the exams going to happen? The AP test.
Yes, the AP tests they're on a slightly different format and schedule. They've kind of given some real guidelines about what's going to be covered, what's not going to be covered, and there's some different options about how they're going to do that. The College Board has put a lot of funding and energy into making this work for the students for this year. Those classes are a little bit different, and I mentioned this before. We did, because those students already, when they sign up for those courses, there's a little bit more on them to do some independent learning outside of what the teachers are providing. And so those students have been preparing and working for those all along. Ever since we went out on March 13th, they've been able to continue to do that learning on their own. But this, moving into a different phase now would change a little bit of what the teachers are teaching and covering in the classes too. So again, Mr. LaPrette's been there right with us from the get-go, and we feel that our students are going to be well prepared for all those pieces.
All right, good. And then the other question is kind of like, you can't foresee the future, but if the school is continued to be virtual till the end of June, how does that affect in this personal development days? Professional development days, not personal.
Professional development days.
Yeah.
I believe there's only one other day that's scheduled, and it's a half day, and that just would not be a professional development day. I believe it's May 22nd.
Yeah.
And that is the only remaining. Oh, actually, on June 5th also is a half day. So those days would not be professional development days. Our remote learning plan includes professional development for teachers, and so it's already sort of built into our plan. And so those days that are in the schedule would just be full days of remote learning. They would not be professional development days.
Okay.
And it doesn't that wouldn't impact our calendar because they're only half days.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at the calendar. That's why I was just kind of like wondering. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Diana, any questions or comments?
Yes, I actually just had a couple of questions for you. If we move forward with the phase 2 of the plan, and I'm assuming that that is the majority translated to new content, I'm assuming that across all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, that there would be an element of teaching on the, obviously the teacher's half of things, not so much, it's all been independent learning. In my experience to date, a lot of just assignments and sort of, it feels very much so like virtual homework. And I can only speak to the elementary level, but I was curious, are there going to be true lessons, or is that going to be the expectation of the parents?
Good question. Yeah, I would say that I don't know that your experience is the experience everyone's having. I think that a lot of teachers are doing some virtual reteaching or lessons or check-ins with students. What they're not doing right now is they're not introducing, here's some new content, here's a new standard. So there definitely would be that piece of it as well, more than just an assignment. I think there would be some teaching. The thing that it might not be, that a lot of folks might think it could be, is sitting down at a specific time, logging in to a live lesson. It may not necessarily be that, and that a lot of that is not even recommended just because of technology connectivity issues. But what you might see are a new lesson introduced by a teacher by video that then the students are clicking on and watching. So I think a lot of that is happening now, but it's not really teaching them and introducing something new. So when you say that your experience has been a lot of assignments that then parents are expected to do with the students, I hope for the most part that won't feel that way, and that's good feedback that I'll bring back to folks, because it's the parents' role is really to support to the best of their ability and to reinforce. And I know at the elementary level especially, I think it does feel a lot more like there's more explicit teaching because the students need more support, right? Just in general, than they would at the other levels. And so, I'm anticipating that we may be a little bit slower to move and to roll into new content at the elementary level. I'm not entirely sure what our discussions are going to lead to, but I definitely think that your point about making sure that anything new that's introduced has all the supports from teaching and guided supports for students. It can't just be, here's something brand new that the students have never seen before, and now the parents need to relay that. That will not be effective. So that would not be what we would recommend, for sure.
Thank you. No, I actually, as a parent that is on that, there's two different camps that you are communicating, struggling with just, lack of independence at that level and special needs, and two working parents. I'm actually an advocate of new content because I feel like all the work that you're putting into it and the struggles that you do have trying to comply is worth it, versus just, doing work that's already been taught. So I'm actually a big advocate of moving forward with that. One thing that, my last question was just around grading. I know in your last email you mentioned that, there's really no tests or that type of grading happening. If we roll out, the new content, is that when grading might apply? And please correct me if I'm wrong with the grading piece. One of the concerns I have is that if there's limitations of parents that are supporting children, is their grades going to be impacted when it's not really a reflection of them, but more so a reflection of their home environment and the restrictions on their support around them?
Sure. Good question also. So our plans before we would roll anything out would be to clarify all of this, but we would not be recommending that there's any kind of grading or anything that would really impact anything like a GPA or things of that nature at the upper levels as well. We would continue to provide standards-based feedback as we are doing now at the elementary level. we would continue to provide assessments and feedback on skills and at the secondary level, but it would not be necessarily translated into a number or a grade, and those grades and numbers would not impact the grade. So the high school, I've been looking at their plan today. By the way, I should mention too that the elementaries have finished their conferences. The high school's a plan in place to have their conferences as well. We would come out with some clear language around third quarter ending. Third quarter is a little bit different because we had the majority of the third quarter was already completed, and now we've had some time for students to do some makeup assignments. And so that's happened, and third quarter will be clearly defined and delineated, and then what fourth quarter and end of year grades and all that makeup look like would also be communicated as well. I know the high school is looking to use some of the rubrics that have existed for quite some time at the high school about student expectations. So we still need to have that level of accountability and certainly the incentive for students to do work. And you know, without a grade, we don't want there to be a disincentive to be fully committed to the work. But at the same time, we're not going to introduce all the issues that surround grading and GPA and all that as well. So we would move forward with the content, we'd move forward with new learning, but we would not be pushing for grades or anything that's going to, you know, in that sense, look just like school. Now, if we go back to school and we're face-to-face, you know, we have to consider that as well, what that would look like, you know, how much of it's a return to normal. But for right now, we're in this phase and we're trying to think about what fourth quarter would look like and end of year would look like, and that's the plan that we put forward.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think Julie dropped off. Any members of the public have any questions? I have a few afterwards, but I want to open up to anybody from the public. I also think Norcan was having trouble getting on, so I might email the link in a second. But I have a few questions to start. So number one, Dr. Daly, you talked a little bit about MCAS, and you know, I believe it's just MCAS is waived for the rest of this year. Is that correct?
So yes, the commissioner has waived MCAS grades 3 through 10 for the year, and they are just waiting to get some more information about the competency determination, which is the requirement for students to pass that assessment in order to graduate. So they're just waiting for a little bit more with that, but they have canceled all of the testing for all grade levels, including high school science, for spring of 2020.
Okay, and that'll later me. I think we have to talk about graduation and all that, but for right now, one suggestion, and this kind of piggybacks on Diana a little bit. I think my wife and I are trying to help them all. My wife's doing 95% of it, so I'm not going to act like we're doing this equally. But I know if there is new content, one thing that I would hope is that there would be some sort of support for parents as well. I know that in the elementary, a lot of times with math in particular, a lot of teachers will send home like, this is what we're doing, you know, this is how you do the math. And so I think that would be particularly helpful, especially at the elementary level, that if they're, especially with math assignments in particular, if there could be some parent guides that are sent home as well. Not saying that parents have to be teaching it, but just thinking about that, and even potentially office hours for parents at the beginning of units, where, you know, there could be videos geared to parents to help support the kids. Just a suggestion from me.
Yep, that's great. I'll pass that on as well.
And so you were mentioning, like, if we move forward with phase 2, would the structure be the exact same, or would the structure be some, you know, different than? I mean, I think from what I've seen, I think the structure's been pretty good. I know that it can vary grade teacher to teacher, but overall, I feel like the structure, and you know, here's 30 minutes, you know, here's 3 hours, here's 30-minute blocks. I think that's been delivered pretty well so far from what I've seen. So would the structure remain the same? It would just be the content would be different.
I would say that would be the only real change. The structure would remain the same, and it would be just the idea of some new concepts and content. And in some ways, I mean, teachers may have introduced a new book and they're still going to the same standard. So everything we do every day is new, even if we're revisiting something old. So there's certainly been new experiences and new ideas. This is really about moving forward with the curriculum, and that would be the biggest change that we might see.
Yeah, I mean, and my fear is, of course, equity issues, especially with students with student services that, people that help them. But with that being said, I agree. I don't think we can just review content for the remainder of the year if we're going to be in school or, doing any sort of assignments from home. And so, so I do agree that I think, soon we need to move on to new content. But, yeah, so that's all my comments and questions. Does anybody else have any follow-up questions? If not, actually, one follow thing for Michael. I will probably advertise as well, so maybe I'll connect with you, Michael, offline about the meals, because I do want to make sure that the community understands that even if you do not qualify for free or reduced lunches, if it would be helpful, you can absolutely, reach out for a lunch, because if anything, it's not a burden on the school. It would actually be beneficial to the school, since we are being reimbursed fully from DESE for those meals. And so if you do have students at home and you would like a free meal, I mean, it's actually better for the school district, because people will be coming in to make them anyways, and whether you're making 45 meals or 145 really is that much. The cost is that much different, and we get more reimbursement from DESE for that.
So, Mr. Buckley, just to that point, there's going to be an email that's going on at 9 a.m. that tomorrow morning that is a reminder to all families that, number one, all families are eligible, and just again how the program works, what time the pickups are, and how to just quickly register for that. But yeah, anything you can do to promote and advertise is certainly would be helpful.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay.
I just think to make it clear though, Michael, folks, it's not a la carte, right? If folks are signing up, they're basically signing up for the program, right? We're not saying like I just want lunch this Tuesday. It's I want lunches as a part of the program. Is that correct?
That's correct. They're kind of signing up, indicating that they either want a cold breakfast or a cold lunch, but they are kind of signing up, as part of the program, and we would then provide those meals on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the next couple of days each time. That's how it's functioning right now. So yes, thank you.
Okay. So moving on, we have the school calendar update, and we need a discussion and a vote on that. Dr. Daly.
So thank you, Mr. Buckley. As was discussed a little bit at our last meeting, and I believe it was Mr. McGowan's suggestion, it's really gained some traction about breaking up the vacation a little bit. I think we've certainly seen many more districts now go to where we were thinking North Reading was going to go, which is to not take the full week of April vacation next week and to power through. And many districts are doing something similar to taking a day or a couple of days next week and then using those days at the end of the year to get out early. My recommendation is that we observe the Monday holiday, Patriots Day, which is a holiday for everyone, and then to also take the Friday of next week as a vacation day. I think it is an exhausting experience, as I mentioned earlier, and I think to have a couple of days, so basically 2 extended weekends as a little bit of a vacation, and then to have the 3 days in the middle, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as full remote learning days. The reason why I would recommend doing the 3 days and not 2 and not 4 is just the way our schedule is designed. As I mentioned, we have some built-in professional development and learning that's scheduled on Wednesdays. And at the secondary level, we're certainly doing green days and gold days, or days, even days, and odd days. And so by having 3 days, it actually works out really well. You've got one green day, one gold day, and then also our remote professional development day, where teachers are collaborating and building all the lessons for the future. So that actually works pretty well. The other part that I would recommend is that we don't necessarily say right now that we're going to get out earlier, but we may also we can't commit to the days at the moment because we don't know what beyond May 4th looks like. But in the chance that we do remain out beyond May 4th, we may very well need additional vacation days or additional breaks. For example, maybe that week of Memorial Day, which is May 25th, we may also say, let's take the 25th and the 29th and do another 3-day week there, and that builds in another break, basically another 3 or 4 weeks after the break we had. So my recommendation is that this time we would say for the April vacation calendar to be changed and to say that we would take the 20th and the 24th, and the other 3 days would be released and at the moment would be used towards getting out earlier. Right now our last day would be the 24th, so we would get out 3 days earlier. But I just wanted to add the note that we might want to reuse those days for another break that we could revisit at a future meeting if the school closure is extended.
Thank you. Comments from the committee. Chris, we'll go the same order again. Chris?
Sure. Dr. Daly, it was brought up by, I want to say Mr. Buckley, but by other committee members, what I thought was a very good point previous to this conversation now, which was that in the event that schools do reopen, our days of, in our school calendar that are left of in-person learning are going to be more valuable than the days that we have right now. Not to put too fine a point on it. So is this suggestion of yours being made with a kind of skepticism that we're going to be going back by the end of the year?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm really not sure. I think my honest opinion is it needs to extend beyond May 4th. I mean, just even the concept of coming back right now, the things we would need to do to prepare the school, I think we might need some more time, and I do anticipate that there will be something longer. I don't know right now. There's really no indicators that would move beyond there. I think we still have flexibility about those days, and if we're in school these days, I don't know that necessarily means that we wouldn't be able to be in school some of those days in June. Like I said, we could use some of those vacation days if we decided that that's what we wanted to do. So I think it provides us a lot of flexibility to figure out how we can get students to where we need them to be by the end of this year, or at least to the best place possible by the end of the year. So I think there's some flexibility built in, but I wouldn't read too much into this decision. I think this decision is based upon the fact that we just got our remote learning plan up and running, and as we're talking about here, getting ready for some new content and moving into phase 2, and to just take the entire week off, we feel like we lose a lot of momentum and steam. Seeing that we've been out of school since March 13th, we didn't want to do that too quickly. So.
Okay, thank you.
And Chris, I also think that theoretically, if it's going to be extended, I think they'll extend it, hopefully at least a week before the date ends. So like if we thought we were actually going out back on May 4th, we did that at the last minute, decided to take a couple of extra vacation days earlier. There's a lot of flexibility, I think, in when we did it, but
sure. Yeah, and ultimately, those decisions are really going to be out of our hands. It's going to be on the state level at least. But right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Rich, any comments or questions or thoughts?
No, I generally think it's a pretty good compromise between the two extreme positions.
Do you like your idea?
I like my idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I took a poll with my work colleagues, and I think 5 or 6 people who answered, 5 said that the entire April vacation was canceled, and 1 said that they were going to do some kind of similar to what we're doing, just for reference thing. But
Okay. Diane has no questions. Janine, any comments or questions?
Did you hear me?
No, we did not. Go ahead. Repeat.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and for my thoughts, I like the add back to revise and say that we are not going to be observing an April break on April 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, and those will be, whatever they're called right now, digital learning days, I guess. Can I have a motion for that, if that sounds okay to you, Dr. Daly?
Yes, I would say, yeah, remote learning days, yeah.
I can do that, Scott. I move that given the school closures due to COVID-19, we amend the calendar for 2019-2020 to change April 21st, 22nd, and 23rd to remote learning days and take the Patriots Day holiday and a school vacation day on April 24th.
I second.
is always a major budget driver. We certainly have fixed cost increases to adjust to certainly our obligations for building maintenance areas, for our HVAC contract, plumbing, boiler repair contract, wastewater treatment plant operations, both our regular and special education busing program, utility rates, electricity, gas, water, all these rates kind of go up annually, and we need to adjust the budget accordingly. So that's certainly always a driver of the budget. Then our special education costs, so certainly funds to support both our in-district special education programs, certainly need to be adjusted from an ongoing basis adequately to meet the needs of students, as well as our out-of-district costs for educating students when appropriate outside the district for private day collaborative tuitions and transportation costs. So our budget proposal, I'll just note, did include a reduction in our out-of-district costs, mainly because we are looking at having less students due to some students aging out of certain programs, some students we anticipate coming back in district, educating outside the district. So there actually is a reduction in the out-of-district tuition and transportation lines. But at the same time, there's certainly needs in district to move our in-district programs forward. We've certainly allocated resources to provide additional student support services, in particular in the areas of increased social and emotional support. And all of these programs, in-district programs, all will work to meet the needs of our students adequately, as well as reduce the need for outside placements in special education services. So these are the 5 major budget drivers. Patrick, if you want to go to the next slide. As a highlight, the 5 major categories, I think you can kind of see that the budget drivers at play somewhat. So certainly salaries, as I mentioned, biggest driving factor there, 83.6%. We have our out-of-district tuition costs, which is a small piece of the, at 5.3%. It's actually down about 1% from last year due to the anticipated savings in the out-of-district tuitions by having about 5 less students being educated outside the district. Transportation has stayed about around 1.1 or 1.2% in this allocation. Our operations and maintenance is slightly up from last year. I think we're in about 5.5%. We're up to 6.1 of our budget allocation, and that's just mainly to address needs around increased utility costs, increased wastewater treatment contracts, HVAC, heating, cooling, plumbing. Those needs certainly go up each year that we have to adjust to as well. And then our instructional expense budget is somewhat up. It's been relatively consistent around this percentage point, but we're certainly trying to reallocate resources to make sure the school discretionary expense budget for instructional materials, textbooks, instructional technology are adequately funded, as well as a need to fund technology as well is a big driving factor there. But overall, these don't change significantly from year to year, these scenario breakdowns. So Matt, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk about some of the new staffing positions that were recommended in our proposal to the school committee. So we basically were looking at 6.5 new positions, all driven by both really to meet our budget goals that we set at the beginning of the year. So we had the need to make adjustments due to some increased enrollment at the elementary level. I spoke of that earlier. There's certainly a high kindergarten class moving up to grade 1, so there's a need to add some sections at grade 1 to meet the demand of kindergarten, the higher kindergarten class coming in. There's a slightly reduced kindergarten class next year, so there might be a little bit of savings there with teachers moving up to grade 1. But overall, we're looking at about 1.5 of new FTEs to adequately meet and maintain the appropriate class sizes we're looking to maintain. These next 3 are really driven by our strategic plan and NRPS 2021 initiatives, which focuses on the teaching and learning strategy. You may recall we started a initiative last year to add some academic teaching in the areas of foreign language and STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, curricular areas at the middle school. That was really a specialists, both initiatives at the elementary level that we have recommended before, but have unfortunately, as the budget has moved through the deliberation process, we've fallen short in the funding area. The teaching and learning coordinator, and it would be an administrative position that would assist the 3 elementary school principals in providing support in the areas of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and administration, as well as additional support around supervision and evaluation. The reading teacher at the elementary level would help the schools more fully implement responsive December. So this is the budget gap that would get us based on our recommended budget. And as you know, we looked at a few different scenarios between our recommended budget and what was level services. And recommended was about 1% higher than level services from a percentage basis to our budget. But we, based on the revenue plan as it was presented to us at the beginning of April, we have a slight update to that, which I'll get to in a moment, based on a finance planning team meeting that took place Thursday last week. We were about $585,381 short of a recommended budget and about $324,000 short of a level services budget, which we workshopped to on April 1st. So certainly, any reduction to what we're recommending is challenging, and it certainly creates a lot of debate and difficult decisions as the administrative team and the school committee work in the coming weeks to set priorities and make some very difficult decisions. We were notified at the finance planning team certainly we're in a very unprecedented situation, as everyone can certainly appreciate, with what the state faces, what the nation and then the state and then the local districts on the micro level certainly face in the coming weeks, in the coming months, with our response to any impact to the COVID-19 virus. And I think it's fair to say what we sort of heard from town officials, from finance committee, at the finance planning teams, the chairs and vice chairs of our select board, our finance committee, our school committee, and certainly our town administrator and town finance director, who are working very, very hard to navigate a very difficult situation and a very unpredictable financial terrain that we're faced with, to try to make an FY21 budget work with some very difficult unknown assumptions. So, I think it's fair to say there's some additional work to be done. But what I'd like to do, Patrick, if you want to go to the next slide.
Just 1 second. I just want to add that $585,000 deficit. So that was, as Michael was saying, that was the previous finance planning team meeting that before our budget workshop. At the last one, the numbers, it looks like I think we're about, at the last one, the recommendation was to keep local receipts level from FY20 to FY21, and to keep state aid level from 20 to 21.
Correct.
That accounted for another perhaps $153,000 of cuts.
That's correct. Yep.
And I will tell you right now that it might be worse than that, because frankly, there was concerns that even keeping state budget, numbers level, or even local receipts level, with what's been going on and the impact of the economy, might not be enough. There was numbers thrown around about seeing a budget decrease of 3 to 8% from FY20 to 21. So that's where, just to throw in here, this 585 number, realistically, we're $153,000 away from even being there. Sorry to interrupt you, Michael.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Buckley. That's exactly what certainly occurred on Thursday. So what I would like to do is, at least for the time being, is walk through, certainly for the community that may not been at the first budget workshop, strategic plan or a new position that we were hoping to achieve operationally. So the first three that we would put on here would be positions we don't have now. As I just said, these are not positions that are people that we have today, but they would be positions that we were recommending that we would then certainly defer or back off from being able to fund in FY21. So that would be the elementary teaching and learning coordinator, the reading specialist. Those were the two identified priorities by the administrative team in NRPS 2021, and it would be the Florida custodian that we were hoping to achieve. So we'd have to wait to do those three positions. We then have three positions. This next position is a position that, again, we don't have currently, but you may have, I've been presenting budget updates throughout the fiscal year, and we had two folks in central office that left at the end of last year, at the beginning of this fiscal year, for a variety of life-changing decisions, retirements, and so forth. And we were not successful at finding the right fit for those positions, so we've been kind of doing without about a 1.75 FTE positions in kind of central office, kind of sort of the data world. We've been making those work with spreading some of these duties out against existing staff, or in some cases contractually, small amounts of money for certain hours to get some of this done. And we were hoping to kind of take those duties and consolidate that into another central office support position that would be a combination of what that 1.75 FTE did from the data standpoint, for some human resource, personnel related duties, and make that kind of a one position. We worked hard as a central office team to develop a job description. So what this would mean is we would defer or not go forward with that position, and it would mean we just would continue to do what we are currently doing to fill this need and the responsibilities from a data perspective and an HR perspective. The next two positions are positions that are, some are at a district level, one's at the middle school, that are academic teaching positions. There are folks that are due to retire, and we would certainly defer the hiring of these positions and look to sort of certainly fill the void, in some cases by trying to reallocate additional resources. And when we would do that, the desire or the goal would always be not to impact as much of the classroom operation, class sizes as we can. And certainly there's some challenges with recommending this, or not having these two positions. Challenges on the technology integration and specialist side, or technology support and dealing with technology tickets and so forth. But we would certainly try to be as creative as we can to fill this void by the loss of these two positions. It would not mean a loss of a staff member or staff that would not lose their jobs, since this is due to certainly our savings due to attrition. So that's where those two positions stand. The next position, which is the seventh position on this list, is we had recommended a grade level position at grade 1 at one of the elementary schools. The enrollment there, we felt kind of warranted that, not to try to put a primary grade at an enrollment level potentially above 22. And that the enrollment is always, the increase in kindergarten to grade 1 is somewhat a moving target. So this would certainly we would not fund that position, and there's a chance we might be dealing with a little bit higher enrollment in that cohort of students than we'd want, and we'd have to certainly watch that. Current numbers would show that the enrollment would be around 21 students, but there was a chance with new move-ins and so forth, folks need to go in a private kindergarten situation or something to that effect, the enrollment might increase. So that could be certainly an impact on class sizes in the primary grade level at the elementary schools. The next two areas are not in the personnel areas. We had added a $60,000 line item to help support the one-to-one program that we've fully implemented this year from grade 7 through grade 12 with the Chromebook devices. We were looking to move say that, to the $324,000 number, forgetting that $60,000 was not in the level services budget, it was in the recommended budget. So when I went back after that meeting and reconciled, I still discovered that we were actually still $53,800 short. So what we're proposing tonight is we have to look, and we've done this in the past, at other expense areas. We have to look at some what our staffing turnover attrition savings are. I think we could maybe pick up an additional $20,000 to $25,000 by being a little bit more aggressive in our attrition assumptions of staff turnover savings. And then we'd have to look at certain lines, non-educational lines, some areas around, district supplies, some legal costs and costs in some certain areas to balance off the budget. And I can, certainly in the workshop, I can provide a little bit greater detail on areas we would look to, but they're all areas we've certainly looked to in the past. So a combination of doing these things, had the revenue plan not changed on last Thursday, with reducing these 7 positions, would mean we would have had a balanced budget. We would have essentially had, an FTE standpoint, almost the same amount of FTE, a slight reduction in what we have today. So what this budget does fund in the sense of new positions is it does fund some new elementary positions due to enrollment situation, not to the extent we desired, but it does address some areas. It does fund the 2 academic middle school positions to achieve the foreign language expansion and some of the areas that we began last year. Those were really 2 areas we felt we could not go, given we want to take a step back at the middle school curriculum program, and we didn't want to put any more risk with the elementary class sizes by going any further reductions there. So that's kind of where we would stand. And again, I'll just remind everyone that we're about $153,000 short, that we'd have to go back into the drawing board in a workshop scheduled later on and start looking at other areas. But from a budget conclusion standpoint, I presented this slide in the past. So what does this kind of revised budget do? Well, I think it achieves what's in the black font, where it certainly still allows us to meet our contractual obligations with employees and employee unions. We certainly need to make sure we do that. It does, to a certain extent, maintain some additional staffing to maintain sound student-teacher ratios, particularly at the elementary level. Although there's a little bit more risk in that now than it was previously. It does move forward with the middle school, secondary level middle school programs I just mentioned, and expanding foreign language and STEM. What it does not do is these red areas to what we had hoped. It does not provide the administrative support with the elementary teaching and learning coordinator and the curriculum and professional development, supervision and evaluation area. It does not add an additional floor custodian to help us really be well positioned to meet the operational needs of all 5 schools. Although I do think we're making do with funding that's available. And we're hoping to meet our obligations. I think we will at this point of the payment of tuitions that we're legally able to do, and I still think we'll be able to meet that. And our circuit breaker funding at the moment is in very good financial standing. So I think it's an area of risk, but I'm not super alarmed at the moment. Our revenue estimates may not meet projections, so this is certainly an unknown. I think as we evaluate the extent of the closure, once we know what that is in the coming weeks, we'll go beyond May 4th and so forth. I think we'll know what the right thing to do here is in terms of issuing potential refunds for disruption. I think it's fair to say if certain programs or refunds may be necessary, and we want to certainly do the right thing there. But certainly that may have an impact on meeting some revenue projections. I'm not at a point right now where I'm significantly alarmed. I want to start changing some budget subsidies, amounts, and offsets from FY21, but the risk is certainly there, and it's going to certainly be a need to take some really close look at that in the coming weeks. Teacher attrition savings, so it might be taking a little more risk on by trying to balance that remaining 53,000 at the moment with some additional assumptions here. Nothing we haven't done in the past, but the risk is certainly there. Utility costs can be variable. Carryover assumptions, again, this kind of goes hand in hand with the second bullet. If we do start issuing refunds, that we may have a challenge meeting some of the assumptions we made early on in the budget process by what our revolving funds will look like. Snow and ice remains uncertain. We've dealt with more and more unforeseen building maintenance needs, particularly at the elementary schools. In certain areas around boilers, electricity needs, plumbing needs, as those buildings certainly are the older buildings. And our food service program certainly is in an area where we're not taking in a lot of revenue. We're not taking in any food sale revenue, so we're losing a lot of revenue this year. There will certainly be less reserves, and certainly a balance in this account at the end of this year. There's no possible way of avoiding that. Every district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, if not the nation, will be dealing with that. And North Reading will not be unique in that. And so overall, there's going to be less reserves to maybe address unforeseen. So, I'm saying all these to alert you, and there's nothing that I don't think I haven't said before. But certainly the COVID-19 and the situation we're in has all certainly heightened, these areas, which I think we all can appreciate. If we go to our last slide, and I'm certainly open up to questions and discussion. As we go to the next steps, we're going to certainly have continuing discussions with the finance planning team about available revenues. I think we're going to meet almost weekly or every 10 days or so in the coming weeks. We know we have more work to do now based on the meeting that happened on Thursday, and I really appreciate everyone's efforts in that meeting and the efforts that certainly Michael Gilberto, town administrator, and Liz Rourke, who are working tirelessly to try to mitigate the situation that we're in. So there's certainly some difficult decisions that should be made. We have another budget workshop on April 29th. I think that will certainly be necessary, as we know there's more work to do. So I think we'll have the good thing about the April 29th date is we'll have one more finance planning team meeting prior to that, where we'll be able to see if anything changes and maybe be workshopping maybe a more firm number. The school committee was set to vote on May 4th. Now, there could be some flexibility there with the uncertainty around the town meeting date, but at the moment, we'll still operate that we'll plan to vote the budget on May 4th, and then we're due to present to the finance committee on May 6th. Town meeting is still June 8th right now, and then we'll certainly await what's going to happen at the state level. As the situation is currently at, in the impact to FY20, will certainly have a compounding impact to FY21. That's just the reality. If there happens to be some statewide cuts that come down and actually impact FY20 in the form of what's known as 9 difficult decisions in this climate. But I remain hopeful and confident that all the folks involved at the town level, the school level, the local level, certainly all of you on the school committee and Dr. Daly and our administrative team will work very, very hard to develop a budget that will work for North Reading and try to minimize any impact on the educational experience. With that, I will open it up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Michael. Just to kind of, I want to add one thing and then open up for questions too, but just on the schedule, there was talk at the finance planning team meeting about possibly town meeting being pushed back even further, because obviously this is an unusual time where nobody really knows how long this is going to go or the impact. So our timelines maybe get pushed out a little bit. They were even saying, I mean, there's even the possibility of not funding a full year at a time, but just kind of opening up that possibility. For comments and questions, I'm going to ask that we try to do it in two different phases. The first phase is comments and questions on the budget right now as what we've workshopped, sort of comments on that. This is a budget hearing. I do know there are some members of the public that are listening right now as well. And so we want to comment about that. And then when that is done, I would love to have a brief discussion with the committee members about guidance for the further cuts that are most likely going to be needed, because I have had a few members of the public reach out about some suggestions, which to be perfectly honest, I'm not in favor of, but ultimately the
I had as well. My understanding is that it very well could come out. So that because of the fact that we're not funding any new FTEs under this revised scenario, I think the original revenue plan, as you just highlighted, did include the assumption that there would be some new FTEs, benefit eligible positions. So I do think that there would be a potentially of a fixed cost reduction. So based on last Thursday, I think the 153,000 number was kind of like a worst case, and because there could be a fixed cost savings based on the benefit health insurance, it could be with a range. I think if nothing changes, but now there's still some uncertainty, is probably between 75,000 and 153,000. But that's a very very good point.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, excellent point, Janine. And that's something when I talked to Michael before, because we don't even know that number, I don't even think we can start thinking about the suggestion of other changes yet until we know exactly what that number is and what's included in that. But I just worry that big number's going to go up, and then hopefully that can offset a little bit of it. So my comments first, folks. So first and foremost, Michael, thank you again for doing this. I know you spent a lot of time on this. Even though you tell me it's going to be 10 minutes, I won't hold that against you. The only a few comments first. Only positive that I really want to point out here is that included in this, which wasn't highlighted, but there are some members of the public here. This will be the fewest number of out-of-district placements for special education in a number of years. I think there's been a lot of work done to try to be able to educate our students within the district, and so I just want to make sure we call that out. I'm very sad that we are not even starting to address the full-day kindergarten expenses. That is something that I have been very concerned about. I will also say I'm very concerned if people hear this about next year, because I know there's going to be families that are in very tough economic situations, and I hope that if there are any parents that do want to send their kids to full day and they're struggling, that they reach out to the school and let us know, because I hate that if a student can't get the education that the parent wants to provide that they think is necessary. An advocate of full day kindergarten, I think many people are here, and I hate that we can't address it here, and I worry that that fee will be a very high burden next year for some people. As I mentioned last time, this budget is not level services. We're not going to be close to level services, which is disappointing. But I think we all understand we're in an unprecedented time right now. Only other comment, I'm concerned about being able to balance this year, come out this year, without a huge loss. I know you mentioned refunds, and it's really tough. We're going to talk a little bit about the bus contract later, but that impacts it. My only real question for this part of it, Michael, is with regards to digital learning. I know some of the positions that are being cut are digital learning. This also came up at finance planning, and I'm just very nervous that if there is a need for this again next year, I think the fact that I think the foresight of a lot of the administrators in getting one-to-one devices as soon as we can, Brad Jones helping to, get that plan in place quicker, and having these digital learning specialists in the schools has really been beneficial. We're seeing that benefit now, and I just really worry about how do we cope if we lose those positions, and how many are left, and where does that fall? I don't know if that's for you or Dr. Dale.
Yeah, it's a great question. It certainly came up last Thursday, and we still have a digital learning specialists. We would essentially be going from about 5 to 4 under this scenario. So I think where we would lose some of the support is certainly district level support, mainly at the secondary level, as well as that district level position. Also, we don't have data technicians, so that certainly would be more of a challenge to be able to address and stay on top of the various maintenance tickets that may come in, be really across the district. There's really more of a reliance to our network administrator who's addressing the needs of the entire network, to address some low level maintenance tickets, as well as our
Thanks, Michael. If I could just jump in. So um, as mentioned before, the two positions that are not to be rehired are both digital learning. But I had conversations with Dr. Downs and Dr. O'Connell, and our commitment overall as a district is to the expansion of the middle school program. And so we believe in that curriculum and that program moving forward. And so it's a difficult decision if we have to make it, but that's what we would do. And what that means is, like we often need to do, is we need to figure out. It's we have a lot of very hands-on administrators. We also have a very hands-on network admin, and it's going to be challenging to do this. But it means that Dr. Downs and myself and other people are doing more support than we're able to do currently. And we'll be creative. We'll try to figure out some other ways to have our other digital learning folks pitch in a little bit more. But those are absolutely positions that we need to bring back. It cannot be a long-term solution, especially that K12 digital learning specialist. Again, in a district without technicians, those folks are providing not only the digital learning support for our teachers, but they're also providing tier one, we'll call it tech support, fixing smart boards, fixing printers, getting into classrooms, installing software, and certainly with the one-to-one program, all the troubleshooting that needs to happen there to repair devices and get them back to students. That's these are the people that are doing it. So not a great area to be cutting in, but we will figure it out. Again, our history here and our preference, whenever possible, if we cannot fill a retiring position as opposed to cutting another position, that is our preference, and that's usually what we try to do.
Thank you very much. So before I move to phase two, are there any other comments or questions from the committee or anybody in the public? Okay, so moving on, the other discussion I wanted to have very briefly, I have a couple members of the public reach out to me, and I do think it's worth at least discussing very quickly to see what the committee's thoughts are. But the one person reached out and knew that we were looking at hiring an assistant superintendent position, which I think we all are aware of. And their thought was, if the position is open right now and it's going to be tough, it's going to be a tough revenue year, whether or not it is prudent to hire that position or fill that position right now, and whether that could be delayed. And so I know that I've talked to Dr. Daly, and I have my thoughts. I will share first, but I want to hear other people's thoughts as well. I know that when I was talking to Dr. Daly, and I'll be honest, like I've been learning what that position is more and more over the last couple of years. But I think, if the finance committee or the finance planning team decides that we think state revenue is going to drop by 10% and there's a 10% loss, I think every position is on the cutting block. So, this is just more for if we're talking about another $150,000, where do we start with? And I would not propose starting with the assistant superintendent position. To me, I think it's a leadership position. I think you need leaders at the top. I think somebody hears assistant superintendent, they think that it's an assistant role where there's somebody else that's the leader. But this position has been called different things over the last 20 years or so. It's basically been the director of curriculum for a number of years, and it really is the leadership position in that role. So I'd be concerned about cutting a director type role. I think you need leaders in times that are tough, and I think watching Dr. Daly and Mr. Connolly both work in the last couple of months has really shown how important leadership is. I think that teaching and learning is obviously a critical role in a school, add in a few months. Like some people were thinking, well, we can add it back in October. Well, the people that are up for at least some of the candidates for the assistant superintendent position are building principals. The reason that we didn't hire him when Dr. Daly was appointed superintendent was we did not want to disrupt the building. To not do this now would mean putting it off another full year, which is, to me, unacceptable. We formed a committee, they did the work, they had great candidates, and so to me, I think this is the position we need to move forward with. The other thing is we're going to talk about contracts in a little bit. I think that's another thing where, I know that it may seem tone deaf a little bit to be, talking about ratifying contracts, but at the same time, most contracts are not up right now, and they're going to be getting their standard step raises and, cost of living adjustments. I don't know that why we can't. I think we have to do it for all unions as well. But I am interested to hear from the other members of the committee if they also agree that we should prioritize keeping that assistant superintendent role, or if people disagree with that. And so I know that's a lot of information, but Rich, I know you usually are okay starting, so would you mind, do you have any comments or questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I hate to say it, Scott, but I agree with the way you framed that almost 100%. I think that, as you said, given what we think now is going to be an additional, $100 and something thousand dollars that we have to go to, that's one thing, and I agree 100% that I would, and correct me if I'm not catching what you were saying, but I think you were saying that given the additional $100 and something thousand dollars we have to get to, this would not be a position that I would consider cutting this one. If the revenue drop is more draconian than that, then, as you say, everything's on the table. We'll have to sort of take a holistic look at everything. But I think that the experience, obviously, the whole team has been put through a stress test in the last couple months. And while they've come through it admirably, the stress part of it can't be emphasized enough. And to think that stress level would potentially be there for a full year, I don't see how we can expect people to maintain that. So I agree with your framing of all that.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and again, if we're talking about putting 20 kids in a first grade classroom, then it's a different discussion. But if we're talking about being able to maintain somewhat reasonable class sizes, and I think this is a poor position. Chris, do you have any thoughts or comments?
I do lots. I mean, I think that there are well over a dozen excellent reasons why we really should staff this position right now. And agree with Rich. It's too bad that you stated all of them so eloquently. Something I can add to it. But yeah, you threw everything at the wall there, and I think those are excellent points. I hope that people take that to heart. This is an incredibly important position. It's one that has been getting done by a team of people maybe that fill in, and I don't think that's a sustainable model. I think it needs a full-time person in there doing it and growing in that position.
Perfect, thank you. Diana?
Yeah, so Scott, I am in complete alignment with every statement that you made in this regard, and I absolutely would not be in favor of considering to cut this position. I think it's a priority. I think we need to treat it that way. So thanks for, as everyone else said, articulating that so well. I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. I didn't have time to prepare for this because you reached out to me about it. So, and then Janine, any comments? Are you in agreement?
No, actually, I think he shouldn't be replaced. I'm just kidding. I think obviously it needs to be filled in so quickly. Curriculum is the driving force behind everything that the school does. And I have complete faith in Mike being able to be the wizard that he is and find any of the monies that we need to get that position filled.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and I think sometimes the public doesn't understand that. They see that Michael is the assistant superintendent, and they think, well, why do you need a second one? But I am impressed by Michael
Great, and I appreciate the words that everyone said. You know, having served in the position for 10 years, in one form or another, and knowing that the position existed for many years before, there's been a central office team of 4 with student support, um, finance, curriculum, and the superintendent. I can't imagine doing this job without it. I've essentially done, 2 jobs since January for the reasons, as you mentioned, that I did not want to disrupt schools mid-year. I've had various folks filling in and doing quite a bit of delegation of some of the responsibilities, but on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of work that I do, and I like to remind folks too that when we think of it, a lot of folks don't understand what the position is. Curriculum is one piece, and unfortunately, one of my goals is to try and make it more about curriculum. But I've often said it's about 20% of what I get to do. The human resource part alone is huge. Everything from the hiring of new staff to getting people up and running in the mentor program, getting all of the lane advancements and things like that moved out. Without this HR position, without any advancements there, to do this coming into hiring season, it will be nearly impossible for me to do that and to do my job as well. I mean, this 6-month period here from January to June was a short-term fix where I took on additional work and responsibility in order to not disrupt the schools and to try to get the best pool of candidates. And it was something I was willing to take on because I knew it was best for the district, and I knew I would end up getting the best assistant. But I appreciate your support in recognizing how important this is to move forward as a position. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Any more comments or thoughts or questions from anybody on the public hearing? Okay, hearing none, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I appreciate everybody, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is employment contracts. Daly, are you going to present on this?
So thank you. We have shared with you tonight, there are contractual agreements with 2 groups, the custodians, the North Reading Custodians, and also the North Reading School Secretaries Association. And if these agreements are agreed to tonight, they will now be known as the North Reading School Administrative Assistant Association. And so what I've shared with you in your packet is some additional information about their the specifics of their contracts. They have been agreed to and ratified by the respective associations, and the request tonight is to ratify. I know that we've shared these with you at executive session, and this would be the ratification of the full contracts for both the custodians and the secretaries.
Excellent. So if we can maybe take these separately. So on the first one, the custodians, it's a 3-year contract. The cost of living adjustments over the 3 years are 2%, 3%, 3%. I can have a motion to approve the memorandum of the contract with the custodians unit.
Scott, I move that the committee vote to approve the, let's see, are we voting on the MOA or on the contract itself?
Patrick, is it an MOA or the agreement? Right?
This is the agreement, and then the contracts themselves would need to get pulled together. But this is the agreement for the next contract.
Okay. So I move that we approve the memorandum of agreement between North Reading Public Schools and ASME Council Money between the local 1703 custodians unit as presented.
A second?
Okay, so any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll do a roll call. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Diana?
Thank you very much. So I have shared with you here tonight some documents related to my goals. It's been, as we've said, a little bit different than maybe I anticipated, and I'm doing things a little bit differently. So at least one of the goals is substantially impacted, and I've addressed that with you previously. But I did want to share that there are many things that I have been able to continue to work on. And so the document that's shared with you here is the formative assessment report. And I wanted to just bring you up to speed. I won't spend too much time on this, but what I've done here is I've copied in each goal at its level and then gave a narrative update on where I am at this point in the process. So my first goal is very much about the continued highest level of effective strategic leadership for the North Reading Public Schools. As I mentioned previously, I was actually able to start in the new Superintendent's Induction Program back in July. That was one of the advantages to being named when I was named, and I was able to start my cohort in July, even though I took over in January. So I've been very active with this group, the new Superintendent's Induction Program, as well as the Merrimack Valley Superintendents Association and Mass Association of School Superintendents. And I have, really come to know folks as we are doing meetings and Zooms and connections on nearly a daily basis. And I think a lot of that work that I've done there strategically with that group has been very helpful to me as a new superintendent. And I certainly feel that a lot of what I've been doing quite publicly, actually, more than I ever expected, to share unified messages from the Merrimack Valley Superintendents Association in respect to decisions to cancel school for the initial 2 weeks before the governor had declared that, were really lessons in leadership and quite substantial moves towards this goal. I also, one of the things I'm most proud of, one of the responsibilities that I dedicated this year was the Assistant Superintendent responsibility of professional development days. There's a full school day on March 6th that's very, very time consuming and quite an investment of time. And I was able to meet and train with Mr. Colleen, along with Nicole Orlando, my administrative assistant. She's actually the administrative assistant to the assistant superintendent. But the three of us worked together to come up with a plan, and I'm very proud of myself that I was able to back away from that day and really let Mr. Clean and Miss Orlando do a lot of the work to get that day up and running. That was one of the duties that I was able to share, and I'm very proud of that, and I shared that there. And continuing to improve professional development through my learning plan. The second goal is the speaking about achievement for students at different levels. And so we did quite a bit of work in the first few months. I really changed some of the ways that we have our school meetings. I've had very different kind of structured conversations with the principals at every building about school visits. And I focused on this concept that when I visit their school, I'm observing the principal, observing the teachers. And that in some ways was a bit of a shift from previous supervisionary visits. And that's built on a model that is something that's out of the Department of Ed that we've talked about in my new superintendent's induction program. And so in addition to walkthroughs of buildings, which is a chance for me to be visible and to say hi to the students, I'm also in this role to observe the principals doing their job of observing teachers. And we're reflecting, what did we see? Do we agree? And we had a very good process that was going. We also added something else, which was just the idea of, everybody on Tuesdays would have a half hour where they were in classrooms. And this includes every administrator. We wouldn't initiate any new business. Michael would send an email. I wouldn't send an email. A principal wouldn't send an email. There'd be nothing new. And we knew that from 10:30 to 11 on those Tuesdays, we were getting into classrooms and walking through. And it's been wonderful. We were only able to do it a few times before school let out. But I got to do some walkthroughs with Cynthia Conant. I got to do some with Dan Downs, with Kathy O'Connell. I got around, we walked in small teams of 2 or 3. And I think everybody, teachers, everyone has just immediately picked up on just how much more visible we were with this initiative. And it's something that I certainly hope to continue when we when we go back, and we're going to actually talk about, what this kind of visibility looks like now that we're into our remote learning. There's ways for us to visit virtual lessons as well, and I know a lot of our administrators are doing that. So might look a little bit different for the next few weeks, but that's something we're going to continue with there. So I wanted to provide that update. Yes.
One quick question. So on my hand up, there are boxes for on target, off target, and not started.
Yep.
Were any of them, had you intended to check if you were on target on these goals or not?
I believe, yeah, my understanding is that's what you folks would do. You folks would decide whether what I'm showing you is whether I am on target. I can certainly provide where I feel with those. I feel like I am on target with all of them except for one that's a little bit different, which is the next one, a little bit, which is about the part of my entry plan, which was to put out a survey to the parents of the community about what they'd like to see in the schools. I've backed off from some of that. That would have been done right around the time that we went on a school closure. And I have brought this up at previous meetings. My goal there is to, focus our communication on everything related to the school closing and our remote learning plan. And I did not want to, at this difficult time, ask folks additional information about, what they'd like to see in the schools or what they'd like to see from me. So that was a decision that I made that I shared with you that I think everyone agreed with. So that's why that is where it is. But I don't feel that we're very much off target from our original plan of, moving towards some reviews and renewals and updates of NRPS 2025. I still think, I'm collecting a lot of data. It's just very different. It's not a survey that I sent out, but I'm getting a ton of information on the community in slightly different way. So it's not that I'm not going to go back and do some of those things, but I feel like we have a lot of information. And I'm also in a very different position. Certainly, I would still go through these exercises because I'm seeing it through a different lens, but I'm not a brand new superintendent either to the district. I've been here for 10 years, and I certainly have a lot of information already about the district. It's, this is the same exercise that I would do had I just started January 2nd, but I started back in July of 2009. So the next goal I just wanted to speak to is the cybersecurity program. That program we started right away. That we met all of those assignment one, the pre-assessment, the assignment goals. I shared some of the data and the updates. And again, my goal with this as well is to share some of these more visually with you. But for this time, I'm giving you the narrative. I figured that was what was best at this time with so much else on the agenda tonight. But as you can see that we have a very high passing rate of 92% of all staff that have completed the pre-assessment. In addition to this, we were able to add folks from the community. We have some folks from Town Hall, from the fire department, and from the police department who are also participating in this. And I think we actually have talked with the folks at the government. This is a state program that, as much as it seems like this is something we should move away from right now because there's so much else going on, in some ways, being aware of cybersecurity has never been more important. We talk about, Zoom bombing and phishing scams, and, for now that we're all doing things virtually, there's so many other ways to prey on staff and students, and it's important for us to be vigilant with this. So we are going to continue with this. We have some more time for folks to complete assignment 1. We're going to move into assignment 2, and we're going to be getting our starting tomorrow. I'm going to be testing out, and then it's going to roll out with everyone, these phishing simulations that folks will just react to what's happening in their email. And so I feel like it is a confusing time, and there's a lot going on, but at the same time, it's never been more important, I think, for us to continue with that work. We the next one is another one that is definitely continuing, and it's just a little different than I thought. But we talk about transitioning and using social media and new technologies. I have gone from being a little bit nervous to send a Blackboard to I think I'm an expert now. I send them very often. I've communicated in multiple ways. Something that I've done, I think most folks are aware, but when I send out, I will send out very often a phone call, an email, but also a text. And the text has a short link right to my blog. And I've heard from several parents who've appreciated the blog because all of my messages, when there's so many messages, they're all in one place. And if you miss one, you can just very easily read yesterday's or the day before. All of these things are double posted on our website in clear and easy places to visit. I've also been using Twitter quite a bit and retweeting and sharing a lot of information there. So I feel like, this situation has certainly given me quite a lot to talk about and to communicate. And I feel like I have done quite a bit there. And from what I've heard from folks, it's been fairly well received, but I'm certainly open to feedback and comment on that. The last one here is about social emotional learning. And, this goal, there were two main pieces to this. One was our SEL committee, which we formed. I helped to lead that group. Cynthia Conant and Catherine O'Connell also played key roles in rolling this out and developing a plan. We have an incredible plan for next year. We still have one session with our group for this year that we have to meet, but we have a great plan for sort of that second phase of the rollout. We have our early adopters on board, but we now need to think about how we get more of our folks involved in this critical learning. And so we're going to use both the Ed-Eval system, which will build upon educators' goals, and also our new teacher induction program. So we sort of have a captive audience of our non-professional status teachers who are looking for, as contractually, we are rolling out our program in years 2 and 3. So we're going to combine and get a lot of our teachers trained in this in the next year or two. And by the end of that program, we will have quite a substantial number of teachers trained in this program. We're very excited about that. The second part of this is that we have strategically looked at our K12 Action Team, which I've led as assistant superintendent for many years. And I also see the value in combining, because it's a lot of the same folks and a lot of the same work. We're trying to work smarter, not harder, and have less groups that are doing the same thing. And so we've coordinated a lot of our events and a lot of our action teams with the community impact team and some other groups as well. And we've got some folks coming to our meetings and getting our numbers up and really getting everybody committed to this social emotional work around the table together. And so we've already done that with a couple of our meetings. We had to cancel our April meeting at this time, but we probably will resume and have at least one virtual meeting again this year, and certainly to continue this in the future. So there was quite a bit of work that was already done in this arena already this year. And I think I glossed over it earlier, but under the security, in addition to cybersecurity, there was also the school safety committee, which again I met with a few times prior to the closure, and certainly. I've said this before, I can't say enough of how much we've come together as an entire, not just the police and fire and other folks, but the Board of Health and the town administrator. I mean, I think the amount of time and effort and great teamwork we've put in coordinating our messages and our outreach and our efforts has certainly been more than I even ever anticipated. We had a couple of school safety committee meetings scheduled, and I've probably met with this team now because of the situation probably, 15, 20, 30 times, including a call earlier today. So it's been a great experience. I've learned quite a bit, and it's hard to believe that I am here at this midpoint of this first, half year, but I wanted to make sure I provided you with this update. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daly. I'm going to start with Janine. And so, Janine, do you have any comments or questions? And can you also share a little bit, since you have more experience than I do on this? What sort of vote do we usually do on this? Is it just to accept it, or do we comment on it? And I look at your experience here as well and your comments here, Janine.
Well, first I would like to say thank you to Dr. Daly, who's doing an extremely
So if I may jump in, it may be a little bit. I may be doing it slightly different. First of all, second of all, because I'm in my first 3 years, we've got the formative cycle, which is a little bit different. The forms might be a little different. So, but just exactly as Mr. McGowan explained, my goal was to sort of present it to you tonight publicly. You then can look at it and provide me feedback at this time, and this is to help me to be on target. The way I explain it to our teachers, to put me on the right path to make sure I meet those goals that are to be met in July, and to provide me support and feedback to get there. If you feel that I've not started, that's obviously something I need to start. But if I'm off target, I want to know now so that I can course correct and get to meet the goals in July. So I think that's exactly right. You would now take this information and then provide comment to give to me again in public at the next meeting.
Right, exactly. I was going to say, generally you do it once a year. You don't do it twice a year. So this being the had it been a normal year, this would have been the end of the year summary, not the mid-year. Do you know what I'm saying? So, we would assess you, but it's going to be assessed again later.
So what I would say is that I think we should take a quick pass at this in time for the next meeting. And again, it's really just marking off our thoughts, and then we can comment, during the meeting in terms of more specifics. And then the real evaluation will be at the end of the year, which we kind of need to discuss anyway. The whole calendar is a little screwy with the town meeting being moved, and potentially the budget not being resolved until later in the year. So at the moment we don't even have July meeting scheduled yet because we haven't discussed the next year's schedule of meetings. But I think our next meeting from tonight is May 4th. Is that what I'm right?
It would be if we may have a budget workshop, but yes, the next regular meeting I believe is May 4th.
Right. Yeah. So I would suggest that, and we can come back to letting everybody comment, but I would suggest that Chris and I get our heads together and figure out how we want to handle it. We'll get you guys the forms, and then we'll explain, we'll sort of detail how we want to get them back and be ready to present at that next meeting. Does that make sense for everyone?
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Rich. So, okay, Diane, any thoughts on progress or anything else?
No, I think we have a good path forward.
Rich?
No, thank you.
Chris?
Not at this moment, thank you.
And I'll just say, I think you've done a great job so far, Patrick. I think regardless of what goals we set up to evaluate you, I think you've had some bigger challenges than anybody could have anticipated, and done great with it so far. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's no vote needed at this point in time. We will just comment and plan on having some comments from the committee as a whole at the next meeting. So moving on, we have routine matters. We actually do have a couple topics to discuss in here, but I am going to just go in order just so I don't forget anything. We have a couple sets of minutes here. So Janine, since you're our expert on that, I have a motion first, and then a motion in a second, and we'll see if there's any errors on to accept the open session March 18th, 23 minutes.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for March 18th open session as written. I did not see any error.
Okay, any discussion or any other comments or changes anybody noticed? Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Chris? Aye. And I am an aye as well, so unanimous 5-0. Thank you very much. And Janine, if you wouldn't mind, go on to the March 23rd, 2020 open session meeting.
I make a motion to accept the open session
still with us, Michael? Did we lose you?
I'm sorry, I'm here. I was muted. I was talking.
Right.
So, thank you, Dr. Lee. So, yeah, in the form of budget update today, it's not the traditional financial update, but certainly as we look at recommendations on the FY20 budget. And, so there was a memorandum of agreement. I do have an update, a favorable update to that agreement this evening. But I think I just want to provide a little bit of context and background between some of what's been taking place really statewide with transportation companies. So there's certainly been a lot of conversation at the state level. The Associate Commissioner of the Department of Education, Jay Sullivan, has weighed in on several conference calls, and we've set up a lot of working groups to really go back to the various transportation providers, ours being NRT Corporation, and trying to work with them to develop really a proposal or an MOA or an agreement that kind of works for all. I think we've all tried to take the approach that these services, this is really a partnership in a way. Transportation, the safe transportation of our students in North Reading certainly plays an important role. And we're all facing very challenging times financially. The companies and our vendors that we've relied on to deliver very important services, transportation being one, as well as various others in terms of our special education services, our tuitions, our collaboratives, our private day schools. They're all faced with many of the same challenges, and they're all working on behalf of our students. So I've certainly taken the approach with a lot of my colleagues to try to hear out various vendors, NRT being one of them, and trying to approach this in a way that will assure, first and foremost, that when we do resume normal operation and school reopens, that we're able to provide the transportation service to our students, in a safe and effective manner. But certainly, that being said, there's a financial conversation that has to be had at, what really is an appropriate amount for districts to be incurred during the school closure period. And there's been a team of colleagues that have been working with NRT Corporation, and certainly myself being one of them, and many of the area North Shore, Merrimack Valley districts that also contract with NRT have all been part of these conversations. And so I have been privy to a few presentations by John McCarthy, the CEO of NRT, and he's presented his finances and the situation with his company, and we've tried to work out a plan that was kind of work for all. So there is an agreement that's in front of you that essentially, I'll just say before I get to kind of percentage numbers, what it essentially attempts to accomplish is that we would be assured by paying a percentage of the contract during the school closure period, a continuity of service. Service would be able to continue sure everything that I just presented would be the case. We would not be incurring any costs should there not be should there be no athletic season this spring, or any school related field trips, given a prolonged school closure. So the update that I do have is the percentage that's referenced in the document. I'm happy to report tonight that Mr. McCarthy has kind of heard some concerns about that percentage rate through various business managers, through even senior collaborative board of directors with a team of superintendents, and he has gotten more aggressive on working with his cost and his team, working with his insurance company that insures his vehicles to reduce his costs during the school closure period. And as a result, he's gotten that percentage number significantly down. So the amount that's reflected in the MOA this evening is not the right amount. I'm happy to report. So it would certainly be the highest we would pay would be at 80% of the contract price. So there's certainly fuel savings that would be a part of this. He's been able to ensure there would be a level of insurance savings. And then when school were to be reopened or operations were to return to normal, those insurance costs would go back up on his end. And we would get the reassurance almost like an insurance policy that our drivers would be ready and available to return. If we need services during the school closure, they're there at no cost. Our equipment's going to be maintained and kept up. Inspections and
base contract is about $70,000 a month. And if I can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so. We're looking at about 3 months, about 210,000 with the base contract, what we're talking about the discount on. But really, NRT would have made an extra 35,000 or so in athletics and field trips and other sort of activities. And so when you think about it, like it really, they're not losing just now it's going to be 20% if we're paying 80%. They're not just losing 20% of that 210,000. They're also losing the full athletics and full field trips. And it seems like what they've done is they've allocated their expenses over all of those, so the profit margin is really spread out. So the way I'm calculating it with the 80% would be there'd be about a $42,000 savings on the base contract, but then we'd also not be paying the $35,000 or roughly of athletics and field trips. So the total savings would be about 31.4%. But for purposes of refunds, like that 35,000 we don't actually have, which is why I'm a little bit nervous if we go to the next level of refunds. But with that being said, the way I look at it is we're effectively getting about a 30 to 32% reduction of what we normally would be paying, or NRT essentially is taking in about 30 to 32% less than they normally would be taking in, which seems like a fairer amount than what I thought it was before. But I want to open it up to questions from other people. So, I don't know, Rich, do you want to start? You look like you're off mute.
Sure. First of all, we need to discuss varying leave. Might have wanted to leave with the adjustment in the rate, but that's okay. So conceptually, I'm in favor of all of this. For a number of reasons, but in a practical sense, Michael, what you explained, what you talked about in terms of, I think we're all going to find out it's a lot easier to stop this economy than it is going to be to start it back up again, and that goes to, running a bus business as well, I'm sure. So I think the goals of all of this are right, and I think 80% or whatever the number turns out to be makes a lot more sense to me than 95% did. Just looking at it, just thinking about, if you look at in our budget, even our personnel costs, being our salary costs being 83% of our our budget, probably something similar or even less than that for his business, because he doesn't have obviously high insurance and financing costs. But so this number makes more sense to me anyway, and I'm much more inclined to go along with that number than I would have been at 95. So I'm okay with that.
I can't have the questions.
I actually agree with Rich. I think, Scott, hearing your breakdown, it makes a lot more sense to me. I mean, the numbers as we initially reviewed were a little hard to swallow, but I think that interpretation really helps understand the total impact. So I am supportive.
Janine?
Okay. I might have missed something, but I have a couple of different things. With the PPP that's out there, won't their employees be reimbursed first and foremost?
When you say reimbursed, you mean will they be eligible for some type of if they were laid off, would they be?
Won't NRT, or have they, I guess, applied for the PPP, which means that they won't lay off their employees and they will continue to pay them, and that it will be forgiven.
Right. So NRT, they don't necessarily qualify for everything. They don't actually qualify for a lot of the small business rates that is covered under the PPA. Yeah, they're a very large company, extremely large company.
Oh, okay. All right. So then,
yeah, I'm sorry. He can explain that in our presentation.
And then I think Scott might have hit on it a little bit, but how much of the contract of gas maintenance
drivers employed, and they would return as our drivers when school reopens.
Okay.
So maintenance would continue. The buses, quite honestly, the buses not running is almost, they need to be maintained even more so right now, quite honestly. So there would certainly be some level of maintenance continuing. And yeah, certainly there's a level of fuel and insurance cost savings that they're going to be achieving through not operating and not being school, and that's kind of the main savings that we're trying to capture here.
Okay. And then a question too. Should school not reopen for the remainder of the year, are they going to reimburse us, and I should say, are we going to reimburse families?
If school were not to reopen this year, is that it?
Yes.
This is sort of the agreement during the school closure period. This is what we're putting in place to ensure those drivers remain employees for the school closure period. So if it extends to the end of the year, then that extends to the end of the year, and then in September they'll be ready to resume.
Okay. And then I guess to that end, are we obligated to reimburse families because they didn't use a quarter worth of their payment for
I don't know if we're obligated, but I think this is a very unprecedented situation that no one could foresee. Typically when someone signs up for a bus pass, there's clauses that say it's a non-refundable bus pass. And typically after a portion of the year, we necessarily wouldn't be issuing refunds, but it's except for specific situations. This is just completely unprecedented, and I think it certainly begs the question. I think it's a conversation we need to have as we know more about the school closure period and how long that potentially could extend this year. I certainly have run some scenarios of what that would look like and what that would mean financially if a portion of a refund was given.
Okay. Thank you. That was just my question.
I'll just say we've talked about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Was the question, Rich? Might catch it all.
Rich, can you repeat yourself? Rich.
Sorry, my computer went to a different place. It feels like we have in general, the conversation about reimbursement on a number of different categories is still to be had for us, right?
Correct. Right.
Sort of this separate. This is just us and the bus company, us and the bus
Yes.
and all the other things that it's all to be discussed.
Yes, I think it is a separate. They both ultimately would have an impact budget-wise, but I think it is separate. I think right now we're looking to agree to pay a portion to the company, certainly not a full portion, but a percentage basis. That's fair and that we can understand based on the savings they're incurring. To also just be, as I've said, be ensured that they'll be able to pick up where things left off with when we do resume, and we all know at some point we will be resuming school.
I just wanted to add that, in addition to the concept of a reimbursement or a refund, we've also discussed some kind of voucher or credit. Just something to be discussed. As we said, there's a lot still to discuss, but in some ways that concept may make more sense for us for the future than issuing refunds to folks for this year. So just something to keep in mind.
Okay, Chris,
Okay.
companies, things like that. But I just want to make sure that we're, I would hope that NRT is not just trying to, other districts are cutting into it, that, that we're getting a good deal or something fair. Ultimately, for refunds, the way I look at it is if it's 80% and we're saving essentially $40,000 the rest of the year. I mean, typically about half of that comes from school, half comes from bus permits. So I would see at most there'd be about 20,000 to be, split up. But again, I think that's a different discussion right now. We have to get a deal. I think that I don't love this. I mean, I hated 95%. I don't love 80% still. I hope it can be less than that. But I also know from my experience, usually if Michael's, that feels in this before, like if Michael's usually, adamant about it, Michael's usually right on his thoughts on things. He's the one that's in the room, and so unless I have real reason to overturn his opinion on something, I tend to defer to Michael, just like I would defer to Dr. Daly and those things, and so I would be supportive of it as well. So I think we need a motion to approve the memorandum of agreement, understanding that the percentage may be changing still. So I don't know if somebody wants to make that motion for us.
I'd like to move that with the understanding that it's not going to be 95%. That's okay.
Yeah, I would say assuming 80%, possibly less than one of those lines.
Yeah, 80% or less, maybe.
That being the case, I move that the committee vote to accept the memorandum of understanding between the North Reading Public Schools and NRT Inc. With the proviso that the percentage stated at 95% will not be the case. It will be 80% or perhaps less.
That's great.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this? For roll call, Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm in favor as well. Aye. So it passes 5-0. Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
There's no staffing at this time, correct, Dr. Daly?
That is correct.
And so, for bids and donations, I know Michael was going to talk about the LED project, and I might try to move it along slightly, but I'm going to jump in if it's okay with you, Michael, quickly. But we did have a committee forum that looked at the two different LED presentations, one from ELC and one from a company called Energyware. Really appreciate everybody on that committee that was there and gave their time. From that, we got two really good companies that did a great job of presenting. The one wrench that was thrown in at the end of that was we were prepared to offer the contract to ELC. I think it was done, and then the other company did come back with a revised proposal, which was better. And fortunately, ELC also came back with a revised proposal. So I think we, got to the same point we were at, which was we thought that ELC was a better presentation or a better proposal overall. But that's sort of like the update on the committee. But I turn it over to Michael to talk about the next steps.
Yeah, I think Ms. Buck, I think you kind of said it perfectly. That was sort of the process. Certainly appreciate the selection committee's role in hearing the presenters. Diana was a part of that. Don Kelleher, Liz Rourke, Wayne Hardacre. Certainly two very qualified firms. I maintain that we almost couldn't go wrong. I think we would have gotten good service and a good project from both based on references and so forth. We certainly like ELC's approach a little bit better and get a little bit better original numbers from them, as well as better warranty and insurance coverage, which was attractive. And Energyware got a little bit more aggressive when they found out that they were potentially going to be the awarding firm. And to be fair, we gave both firms a chance to kind of sharpen the pencil and come back with a revised best offer. And ELC essentially mirrored the revised offer for Energyware. So as Mr. Buckley already alluded to, I think we're looking at two very
seems fairly conservative in some of their estimates. So it really gets us down to almost the exact same cost, in savings and monthly payments. And so over the course of 5 years, it almost pays for itself. Any comments, Diana? Since you're on the committee, do you have any comments first?
No, I think this is, I'm glad to see the additional negotiations. I think we're in a good spot, and I think we're going with the right company, or recommending the right company.
Janine?
Sorry, star 6 takes a long time. Anyway, no, it looks really good, and thank you guys for all the time and effort that you put into it.
Chris?
No, I mean, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, and I'm glad we're being conservative on our estimates, and to come out in 5 years, I think it reflects on how good an idea this is.
One quick comment before I call on Rich. The other thing to point out that this does require approval of town meeting. It's in the meeting. It's in the motion that we need to review, but it does require that. And the timeline will be, again, I think it's up in the air depending on what's going on with COVID, but theoretically, the original proposal was it could be done this summer.
Correct.
Rich, any comments or questions?
No.
Okay, so perhaps we can have a motion. There's a recommended motion in the packet. If anybody has that open and would like to read it.
All right. I move to authorize the administration to award the contract for installing LED lighting fixtures at all 5 North Reading schools to Efficient Lighting Consultants, as recommended by the Proposal Selection Committee, contingent upon the approval of a 5-year lease agreement at the annual town meeting as of June to be determined for sure 2020.
Correct. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? So roll call. Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. So passes 5-0, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Great job, everybody. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael did all the work, really, and it was great.
That's what I meant. Everybody, Michael.
Yes.
No, I was thank you.
And it was good to see. It was good to see, the community coming together, and Don Keller in particular, I think, is just a very, very motivated, smart man. So really appreciate working with people on that committee. Okay, for subcommittee updates, first one is finance planning team. I think
I'm trying to do the, excuse me, we need to do the warrant. Yeah, we just need a last motion on the warrant article.
Oh, sorry, I was just looking at the agenda, looking through that. Okay, so can I, Chris, you want to do this one?
Sure, I move that the committee vote to approve the above town meeting warrant article as recommended by the administration to grant approval of a 5-year lease agreement for the installation of LED lighting fixtures at all 5 North Reading schools, contingent upon approval and minor modifications by town council.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Okay, so roll call. Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 5-0, unanimous. Thank you, Rich, for catching that. Okay, looking at the agenda, moving on. Subcommittee, if we're okay. The finance planning team met on April 9th, 2020. I think we've talked a lot about that overall. I think the key thing is we modified the revenue expectations to take out any increase from FY21 over FY20. That eventually cut out some amount of money. We'll still have to determine what that amount is, but we think it's for the schools probably about 150,000, but for the cuts maybe it's less. And I think the biggest concern is, we're hearing from the state budget that there might be a 3 to 8% drop, but that does not necessarily mean that it would be 3 to 8% for us. It really depends upon how that is passed on. Just because there's a budget cut does not mean that it's
So, thank you, Michael. Yeah, I just wanted to share the suggestion that came from Michael Gilberto, the town administrator, today, that we consider possibly any of the items that we have recommended for CIPC. Could they be moved to October as opposed to trying to fund them in the summer? And so, I spoke with Michael about this today. Out of all the items that we recommended, we believe that the pickup truck is one that we really want to make sure we have before the winter. So October is a little bit close, but even with that, we feel that the other items, the computer devices, the lift, those other pieces, they want to try and have the June town meeting vote to be not as complicated, and so they've asked that if we can move things, the request to October, to do so. So I think that, and Michael, if you want to jump in, I feel like we could do this, and I very much understand and respect the position the town is in with respect to this.
Yeah, no, well said. I would agree, Dr. Daly. I think, we'd love to move forward with some of these items. There was definitely a few of these that were ranked kind of high at the last meeting. Given the situation that we're in with the funding and the budget and the uncertainty, I certainly think we could make some of this work if we had delayed it till October.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think we need a motion on that, do we?
No.
That's submitted. Thank you very much for that, everyone. And then moving on, upcoming subcommittee is just finance planning team. Although it sounds like maybe there will be a meeting of the evaluation subcommittee as well coming up. The finance planning team is April 23rd at 8 a.m. There'll be a virtual meeting. For the administrative report, Dr. Daly, you want to talk about the end of your report?
Yes, just one other item I'll say very quickly. I mentioned it earlier, but the middle school is canceling their trip to Washington D.C. and I didn't know whether anyone had any comments or questions about that. But if it's okay with you folks, they're going to send those letters home to parents tomorrow. Does that sound good to everyone?
I don't think that's for the kids, but it's going to happen. Yeah, I don't think there's any other choice here. The only question would be, is there an option for then 2 classes next year?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think those questions I can definitely bring back to Dr. O'Connell and Mr. Maloney to consider. I'm sure they're going to do everything to make this right for the kids in some way. So something certainly to consider. These are unusual times for sure. So I will definitely bring that question forward.
And I would love to see them get the opportunity, even if it's a year later than it typically is.
I appreciate that. I think that's a great idea. For the end of your report, I've included it here. I think Michael is probably best to speak about it. It's to share some news about our end of year report. So I'm going to scroll down if you want to speak to it, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Daly. So it's typical around this time of year that I include the end of the year, the audit of the end of the year financial report. It's required by law that the end of the year report gets audited prior to March 31st of every year, and that audit report needs to get sent to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So the town auditor completed the work of the audit on the report. As a reminder, it's the end of the year financial report. Essentially, this is for fiscal year 2019. It has to be submitted by September 30th of every year, and it captures all the financial activity in terms of general fund, revolving, grant activity, for the district, both revenues coming in and expenses going out, and they have to be reported by
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've gone through the process. We had interviews last week. We have 3 excellent internal candidates: Dr. Daniel Downs, our Director of Digital Learning; Dr. Catherine O'Connell, our Principal of the North Reading Middle School; Mr. Sean Colleen, our Principal of the Batchelder School. And our committee was made up of teachers, some administrative assistants that work directly with this person, central office team members. We had another principal on there, as well as some of our curriculum leaders. And it was really a fantastic process. We learned a lot from each of the 3 candidates. All of them have such great qualities, and all of them have such great potential as leaders. And I've said this to some of you in the past, but I say it publicly. I mean, I wish I can keep all of this administrative team forever, but I can't. I can't hold anyone back from moving on, because they all are going to go on to great things. So I think we need to value what they bring and make sure that we get, we entice them to stay here as long as possible, because they're fantastic. The next round after those interviews, I've now had a second round with my other members of the central office team. This position obviously is the 4th, but Michael and Cynthia, and we've discussed this, and we're reaching a point where we're ready to name a person for that role. Just given the conversation that you folks had earlier during the budget process, I wanted to make sure we had that discussion first, and also just see if there's any other developments in the next week or so with sort of these drastic cuts before we continue the conversation. Because again, one of my main goals is I do not want to be too disruptive. I don't want to name someone and then start a trickle effect with other positions. That said, I also don't want to wait too long, which is why we stayed with this process, because we would need to name another director or another principal to take that person's place. So it's been a great process. We're very proud of the candidates that we have here, and we're excited to move forward with that position soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any correspondence, Dr. Daly?
There is none at this time.
Okay, so I think the future business, April 29th, we'll have a virtual meeting. That's the budget workshop. Hopefully we have some more revenue numbers by then. I think we can do it fairly quickly, just sort of looking at where we're at today and what further cuts might be needed. For 2020, we have another school committee meeting. We'll have the budget vote. Well, it could be changed, but right now that's already scheduled, virtual TBD. Rich McGowan has a question or a comment. Rich?
Yeah, I just wanted to, you mentioned the evaluation subcommittee. Our plan is to have an informal conversation about logistics. I don't think we're going to have a official subcommittee meeting, just so you know, just so the public knows.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comments? Questions? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
And a second.
A second.
Okay. Roll call. Rich?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Janine? Janine, you have to unmute yourself.